productivity has really always been kind of a passion of mine. I know a lot of people think that marketing is probably my first love, but really and truly productivity has always been something that I have really enjoyed quite a bit. The mostly what it's about is about how to get from point A to point B in the best way possible. When I started out years ago, I think like most people, you start off making lots of lists of things to do, and the lists get everywhere. The great thing about sticky notes is that they at least did stick where you put them, or you had the pens. But ultimately, you had to decide that had to be a better way to do stuff if we're keeping track of stuff. So I kind of evolved my system to the point where I would have a card that was for calls and a card that was for errands, and then something that was my to-do list. And of course, you might recognize the organizer, which a lot of people used quite a bit. But the problem with the organizers is that you had to always rewrite your list of things to do to go from the one day to the next day, or even from one time to the next time. And there really wasn't a lot of space for writing, keeping a lot of lists. But ultimately, you have to understand that lists are not everything. The lists are just a way to let you know where you are and how well you're doing with your productivity. Ultimately, you've got 3 S's to deal with. No matter what you're dealing with, whether you're dealing with productivity or whether you're dealing with working with a problem with a client, the first thing you have to do is understand what is their system. What is the system that you're trying to develop? In this case, we're talking about productivity. Then you have to give a structure to that system so that it makes a lot of sense and you have a way of reproducing it. And then you have to have a strategy for accomplishing that structure. So those are the 3 things I want to talk about today and review about how to get things done and how we move forward. So first, let's talk about developing or defining your system. A system is this, it has to be ordered, it has to be very complete, and it's a plan of how you're going to handle something. So at any given time, you always need to be asking, is your system moving you towards your goals? So I think that probably about 10 years ago, I ran across David Allen in Getting Things Done. He actually has been probably a major mentor of mine. I love what he has to say about productivity. Mostly what he talks about is clearing your, what you call psychic RAM, getting everything out of your head and onto paper. I think he's primarily a paper-based person, although I think he has some software over the years that he's promoted. It is primarily, the idea is that if you try to hold too much in your mind all the time, you can never focus on any one thing. While you're working on the one thing, your mind is saying, oh yes, but don't forget you have to go to the bank before the end of the day, or there won't be enough of deposits to cover the checks. So as long as you're always thinking about that, you can never clearly focus on what you have in front of you. So that he developed a system of having lists. And so his process is that you collect first everything that you need to do or everything that you need to think about. Then you process it, then you organize it, then you review it, and then you do it. So I wanted to kind of give a real quick overview of that. So in collecting it, it doesn't make any difference how you collect things. It could be the 3x5 card, or it could be the spiral notebook, or maybe you carry around a recorder to record while you're driving. Ultimately, I think that the most important thing is it has to get recorded in a computer somewhere, because that's the thing that makes it the most flexible in helping you to organize and plan and being more productive. That even means getting everything out of your head and getting it into the computer as well. So he actually looks at he's got a diagram that looks something like this. He says, take all your stuff and collect all those 3M pads and all those spiral notebooks and everything that was on that previous graphic and start to process it. You say, is it actionable? So if I don't have to take action on it, either throw it away, put it in a someday pile, or put it in a reference file. Some people would say Evernote would be a great way to reference. A someday may just be file folders. And of course, we know what the trash is. But if it's actionable, if you need to take action on that, something that's in front of you, then you need to define your next action. So the next question is, will it take less than 2 minutes to do it? If it does take less than 2 minutes, then just go ahead and do it and get it out of the way. But if it takes longer than 2 minutes, then you should either delegate it or defer it. And that would look something like this. If you delegate it, he says you should have a waiting folder. And actually, I kind of like this. I actually have a dashboard in my act where when I've delegated something, I have it so that I can see that I'm waiting for somebody to finish something. If you defer it, it means you're either putting it on the calendar or putting it in a next action area somewhere, that something that you want to do. But if it takes more than 2 minutes, it's a multi-step project, and there's a great deal of planning around it. So how to collect everything into project kind of files and records. So the idea is, let me go back to his wording here. You can collect stuff, then you process it, and then you organize it, and then you review it, looking at your waiting file, looking at your calendar to see what you have to do, and ultimately you have to do it. So in a nutshell, that's kind of what his methodology is making sure, again, his first step in his methodology is to get everything out of your mind and in a list somewhere so that you don't have to be worried about thinking about something. So if you like that kind of a system, then the next thing to do is I have to give it a structure. Now, you certainly can work with paper files, but we're all very high-tech kind of people, so I think it's a perfect way to say, let's look at how we could put this in a computer and how we could work with it and get lots of stuff done. Because we're ACT people, so I would say we could use it in ACT. I think there's a couple of ways, and that's really what I wanted to focus on, is how you could accomplish it in ACT, or how you can even work with your clients to help them figure out how to accomplish things in ACT. You could also create custom tables to do some of these things. I have an example of a custom table. It doesn't make any difference. The idea is what you need to do is give it a structure, and give it a structure for your clients. In particular, I want to just talk about managing a project. There are lots of things. You might have goals and different things to do, but I want to, in particular, just manage a particular project and take it through the system and see how we might do that. So the first thing is to collect. So you basically end up making sure, sit down, you need to take a lot of time and write down everything you need to do. But sometimes I like to collect and process at the same time. So I might create 3 different lists. At this point in time, I might be working on paper. Some people like to start off with paper quite a bit. Others like to just go ahead and put it straight in the computer. I don't think it really makes any difference. What you're trying to do is collect and kind of process the data all at one time, so you're giving some structure to the system that we have. I like to use contacts in my database for projects. I do occasionally run across people who say, no, the database is only for clients and prospects. And while I understand that, sometimes I think that you're being too restrictive in how you use the database. I think it would be really great to use it for other things, because it is a work in progress. It is how you run your business. So I like to take a project that you want to do. So let's say my project is send out newsletters or send out ACT tips. And what I would do is I create a contact in ACT. I may or may not make it a private contact, depending on whether I want to share it with other people in the company. So it might look something like this. I actually create a master contact record called Goals 2012, or whatever year it is you're working with. And I name it, I give it an ID status of goals as well, so it's easy to look up. Then underneath that, I create a record for each of the goals that I have. So I might have, this is a goal to have an ACT tip. Notice, by the way, I also have an ID status of goals here. So it's easy for me to, again, look up goals so I can see my master uh, record that is goals 2012, and then I can see all the goals that are related to it. So the next step in organizing and getting kind of ready is I use the relationship tab to link all my sub goals to my master goal of 2012. So basically it would look something like this. These might be all of the goals that I'm working on. Notice that when I relate the ACT tip to the master goals, that I try to say what year it is, and I also try to give it a priority. Is it a high priority? Is it a low priority? Sometimes I have projects or goals. It doesn't make any difference. It's just a way for me to sort and select, to go through my list to see how these are related. Don't forget that you can right-click in any relationship tab and look up all contacts belonging to that. So I can easily look up all contacts or all of my goals for 2012 and see what it is I have to do. So a second area, you could use reference files, because that was one of the things he talked about in organizing your data and collecting your data is filing things. Of course, you guys know how to attach documents. I won't go over that. And you know how to, I don't know if you know how to attach shortcuts to documents. That was a great tip that we ran across. I think it was in one of our news groups or user groups, where sometimes I just want the whole folder as a shortcut. And all you have to do is create a shortcut to the folder and then attach the shortcut here in the document file, which is actually pretty nice. It's actually an easy way to get to a folder where you're maintaining a lot of your reference files. But one of the things I run across that very few people ever really remember is this attached web pages. You know, a lot of people really like to use Evernote, but let me just switch over really quick. Did you realize this was one of the websites that Dan was talking about, the Smashing Magazine with the 55 high quality icon sets? You don't hardly even notice it. I don't really think it was a really great icon that they used here because it's very un-ACT looking. But I don't know if you realize that this has been in ACT for quite some time, where I can click on this and basically I can attach this page so that if I want to go back to it later on, very much like Evernote, and I can go back to this page and download it. So it by default would put it on my page, but I could also put it on Dan's page. Well, maybe not. I think I'm in the wrong database. But I could easily put it on Dan's page, and it would, yeah, I'm in the ACT demo database. So we'll put it on Betty's page for right now. And now at least it's automatically attached. And I can close this and not worry about losing that link because I know that that web page is there. It is an MHT file, so it takes a snapshot. If someone changes that page or deletes that page, regardless, it will always display an ACT because it was a snapshot of that page at that particular time. So I think that's a great way when I'm organizing thoughts or when I run across an idea. It's very easy for me to attach an idea or some verbiage or something to that ACT tips contact in ACT so that I can go back and look at it. This is just a real quick, you've got all different kinds of things. Any documents that you're using, you can keep their shortcuts. The web page actually attaches to the history, not to the document. But next, of course, the thing is just to realize that once you've got those projects, you've got the overall goal of what it is you want to do, you have to define the next steps and you have to organize your next steps. Of course, we're used to looking at activities and history tab, and that making clients realize that activities is separate from the history. Activities is what you plan to do, and history is what you've done. And it's very important to clearly identify that these are things that I'm planning on doing. That's probably one of the few things that makes it hard to do some kinds of planning and ACT, is that to put an activity or to schedule an activity and act, you really are required to schedule it for a specific time. You can't say, I just want to put it out there to think about it. So a lot of people will get around that by saying, well, I'll schedule it for the year 2020, and that puts it out there and I don't have to worry about it. When I'm ready, I can put it on the calendar. But ultimately, it doesn't make any difference how you do it. You just need a way that you can go back and look at all of the things that you're scheduling, all of the different steps, and be able to sort it either by date or priority. Let me come back to that in a minute. And also realize is that you can delegate. I mean, if your org chart kind of looks like this, it may be hard and you may get overwhelmed. What you have to realize is don't forget that you should be able to schedule for somebody else. If you don't have a staff, you really should look at finding outside people to be able to send things off to, whether they're just remote assistants or whether there's somebody else in the business. But after you take all of these things and you look at them, ultimately, goals are not worth much if you can't connect the ideas to action. There are lots of people that are really great at planning, but they're not very good at execution. So even though you have a system that you've got and that you've put into place, if you don't have a strategy for working that system, it can be a problem. So once we have everything in there, in your system, regardless of how you're using it, one of the things that David Allen really focuses on is that you should be able to choose from your list of things to do from these areas. You should be able to look at the context, the priority, the time available, and the energy available. Most people kind of forget the energy available, and I want to come back to that. But let's look at what that would look like. And this is actually an example of custom tables. Let me go back, because the problem is in the sense of looking at these things and scheduling them in ACT, I can schedule priority in ACT, and I can schedule time available because I can put in the duration. But I can't schedule by context naturally. Context means something like, is this an errand? Is this something I want to write? Is this something I have to do when I'm at home? Is this something I have to do only when I'm in the office? Is this something that I have to do when I'm working in SwiftPage? You put a context for what it is you're going to be working on so that you can group your activities. And actually, I find that to be a very important concept in being able to group things while I'm in one area. Energy available is something that people don't look at quite a bit, and there's no way to mark that in ACT as well. So if I look at, this is an example of a table that you could create where instead of having things that are scheduled, in this case, it's like a scheduled dialogue, but it's a scheduled dialogue with lots of extra fields. Anytime something doesn't work in ACT, you should be able to create tables to help them work better. In this case, you can see that the regarding, if this was like an activity, would be, it was a tip that I wanted to do on how to handle unattached messages. I'm working on it. I've not completed it. This was the contact it was assigned to. You can see it here. I'm one day behind in getting it done. I thought it would take me about an hour and a half. And I can see different pieces of information that are important to me. In particular, there's energy. Again, I want to talk about that in a minute. But because you have all of these fields that you can assign, then you also can look at them in a list view and sort and select by those fields. So the idea is that it would be great if you can choose by some of these things, but you can do a lot of it in ACT as well. So I talked about what context was, but the most important thing is that it allows you to filter your task list. So I want to talk about ways that you could do it or help your client do it. One is that you could customize the activity types. You're certainly, I'd want to be careful with creating too many custom activity types because you can run into like having too many things to do. But certainly you could do activity types that would be project activity types, or maybe you could do activity types that were more specific, like errands or um, um, web development, some things that are relevant to how you categorize the different things that you have to accomplish. I've actually used the hashtags or the NA quite a bit. Let me just give you an example of what I mean. For instance, this was a project, and what I did was on the regarding, I would preface a regarding with the hashtag or the pound sign, and then the next word that was available would be the context. So this is what I had to do on the web. SP would stand for Swift page. I could start to categorize my activities just by putting the hashtag and the context of what I had to, where I had to be in order to execute this. So this is what the long list might look like, where I could, because you know that when you're in the task list, you can sort by the regarding and you can group all of your activities together. Notice that a lot of these were scheduled in 2020, so they're way out there. They may not be things that I want to do, but I can easily filter them using the drop down up here at the left so that I can filter for a specific time period, so I can, again, group the things that I really want to work on. You could also, I have not done a lot with priority, but you could certainly do a lot with priority as well. One of the things I've been recently playing quite a bit with is setting duration. Usually, you know, when you schedule an appointment, you very easily will create a duration. This meeting will last an hour and a half. I've been working pretty hard at developing the duration for my to-dos as well, so that I'm estimating how much time I think this to-do will take. Even though it may be a timeless activity, you can still put in a duration. I think this will take about 2 hours, or I think this will take about 5 hours. The really nice thing is that you can add the duration column to the task list. So the advantage here is, if you think about it, if you have a time where maybe, let's say you get finished early, or maybe somebody cancels and you have a time slot available that you hadn't counted on, this is a really great way for you to be able to sort the task list to look for things that fit within your time frame, or that works within a specific time area, so that you can pick out what would be a good thing for you to work on, so you're not wasting your time. In talking about priorities, we're used to looking at high, medium, low. I sometimes will talk with clients and say, you know, all my priorities are low because I don't ever fool with them, because everything is really high. I have to do everything. But I think that if you want to play with priorities, it would be an easy thing, a way to customize a system very inexpensively. You can work with it on high is have to do, medium is should do, and low is nice to do. Low might be errands or some things you have to pick up. But I think probably more interesting is that, I don't know if you realize, you can customize your priorities. You don't have to make them high, medium, low. You can change the name of all of the priorities. So you could take the priority feature and totally reuse it for something else. Maybe the custom priorities would be your 5 contexts. This would be my errand. These would be my personal things. Well, no, you wouldn't use personal. These would be my computer programming things. It would be a way for you to use priorities in a way that would make sense, or to help you to sort through and select what works best for you. Keep in mind that as you're customizing, you're not customizing to make it look fun or pretty. If it's not functional, you don't want to use it. But I hate to waste a feature. In fact, if I'm not going to use low, if I'm not going to use the priorities for anything, I'm always going to mark everything low, then it's a great feature that I could repurpose and use for something else. Just keep in mind that priority does not transfer to history. So let's say if I did create a priority that was errands, when it was cleared, the word errand would not appear in history anywhere. You only are using priorities to help you filter through the list of all of the things that you have to do, and trying to decide what is the best use of your time at any given point in time. Energy. There's really not a great way to do energy. I've played with doing colors, changing things where this is going to be hard, so I'll just change the color to red, or this is going to be easy, change the color to green, or this will make me lots of money, change the color to green. Energy has to do with how much energy does this require. I know you know that there are certain things, like for me, designing an ACT database is very easy, so that takes very low energy. But if there's a new project, I'm actually working on some quote works things right now, and looking at designing some of the templates for this client where I don't know them as well as I should is going to take a lot of energy. If I wait till the end of the day, if I were to think that I was going to do this after, let's say, this webinar, I would be kidding myself, because I would not have the energy. You need to think about some things and what kind of energy is required to complete the activity. It doesn't seem like a very important thing, but when you get down to thinking about procrastination and things like that, what you're going to put off has to do with what energy is generally required. Ultimately, and the last step of David Allen's methodology was you have to do it. If you don't get around to doing it, it doesn't make any difference what kind of great things you had available to you, or what kind of great list that you have. If you don't do it, you're just kidding yourself. So the third leg to this stool is that you take that system and you develop a structure for it. I mean, you kind of have to decide how you're going to put it into ACT, or how you're going to create tables for it, or what it is that you're going to do. But ultimately, I think the most important thing is strategy. Even if you don't like David Allen, or even if you don't like lists, you have to have a strategy of how you're going to accomplish everything. And I think this is what makes the difference between a successful person and a non-successful person. So I think first, you're not going to be surprised to know that I would say you just need to clear out your space. I'm a kind of a neat freak. I love to have a clean space. If I have things on my desk that relate to personal projects or to other projects, it distracts my attention way too much. So I do like to work with a very clean space. I also try to schedule my time to make sure that there is nothing that's going to distract me. That even includes closing email. I know that's really, really hard for a lot of people, but I think closing email is a really important thing for periods of time. And of course, clearing out your brain, and that's really more the David Allen thing. I keep a pad of paper beside me so that even as I'm working on a project, if something comes to mind that I haven't done, I need to write it down so that I can get it out of my brain and I can go back to focusing, because that is the most important thing. One year, that was my big word for the year, is focus. You need to focus on one thing at a time. We kind of pride ourselves as being multitaskers, but I don't think we're as good at multitasking as we'd like to believe, unfortunately. I think there's I think we're not as effective as we should be. So the strategy is to review, to choose what you have to do today, and just totally eliminate the concept of being a procrastinator. There's lots of things, and things can go haywire. Even though I have my list of things to do when I'm working on my goals and strategies, I try to choose among them what it is that I want to do today, and that may change. Actually, I noticed David asked me if I use Scratchpad, and I do, actually. I've been playing with it, and I kind of like it. And my Scratchpad looks kind of like this. I took a snapshot really quickly, so I just put in here, this is what I have to do today. This is what, if I have time, I might play with these. And then I have some personal tasks of things I want to do. And so it's very easy. When I'm finished, I cross it off. I never send them to Sage Act, because most of these things are already in Act. They're just things that I picked out that I wanted to focus on today. one of the things I really wanted to spend some time talking about was some of the strategies, because I do think the strategies are important. This was a book that I read recently that I really liked quite a bit and got a lot out of. In the it's actually just called Willpower by Baumeister. I recommend it if you kind of like this kind of thing, but I thought I would just do a quick synopsis of what you would learn. The first one is that anybody's supply of willpower is limited, because willpower is, again, what you're going to use to look at helping you to be more productive, to look at your list and to sit down and to actually get it done. And you need to realize that everybody has only a certain supply of willpower, and that by the end of the day it's gone out. This is what actually kind of an interesting one, is that calories will boost your willpower. That's why when people are on a diet, they really want chocolate, or they really want something to eat, and actually eating something will boost your willpower. Of course, the idea is that you really need to eat something that's protein based, or something that will boost your willpower in other ways, not in high calories. But if you haven't eaten a great deal, or if you're at the end of the day and you have not eaten a lot, your willpower will be very low. So it's actually important to have a good meal before you sit down to do some things. This is actually was an important one that they discussed quite a bit, is that the more decisions you make in a day, the more it drains your willpower, even if they're fun decisions or hard decisions. Regardless, it talks about draining the willpower. In particular, they talked about some politicians who do absolutely stupid things with their personal life, and you're like, what were you thinking? And so a lot of it, they thought, had to do with the fact that these people make decisions all day long, so that eventually it just totally depletes their willpower. There's lots of other things involved in that, obviously, but that if you have something on your list that's going to require a lot of willpower, you need to, again, it makes a lot of sense, be putting it at the first, or not put it in a day when you've had to make lots of decisions. One of the things that they discussed, which I thought was really lots of fun, was that if you have a mirror in front of you, they talk about salespeople should have a mirror in front of them because they will smile more and their voice will reflect their attitude. What they found out is that if you have a mirror where you're sitting, that reflects who you are, and if you're goofing off, or if you're doing things that are not productive, that you see yourself doing that, and because you're self-aware, you're more likely to be more productive. So it's kind of fun. I haven't played with this one yet, but I thought it was kind of an interesting concept. Probably one of the major points of the book was that habits put your brain on autopilot. If you have a habit of every morning starting by reading something, or by looking at your email and then closing it, it is your habit. You are on autopilot. It is not a decision that you have to make that will drain your willpower. It's just a habit of something that you do all of the time without even thinking about it. That it's puts your brain on the autopilot and does not pull away from your willpower that you use later in the day. In addition, if you exercise self-control in one area, it improves everything. I thought one of the great and interesting things about this book, which made it probably the most interesting part to me, was that all of the book is based on research. It's research mostly through universities. They're kind of obscure and weird things that they do, but everything is backed by testing. Even they would talk about, well, we thought it was going to be this way, and what we found out was it was in this other way. So in the exercising and self-control, what they did was they had lots of different ones, but the ones that some of the studies that gave us the most insight into the willpower was that they would say, would you just sit up straight? If you practice sitting up straight for the next 2 weeks, that's all we want you to do. And they then had some follow-up studies to show that it because they focused on self-control in one area, it improved lots of other areas in their life. So this was and then the final point, I think, is that if you can delay something, you might be able to deny it. Actually, I thought it was, I don't know that any of you have ever heard of this study. I had actually heard of it years ago, where they did testing on children in a room, and they said, see this marshmallow, don't eat the marshmallow. I have to go get something. And when I come back, I'll bring another marshmallow. If you haven't eaten this first marshmallow, I will give you the second one to eat. And they looked at how these children coped with delaying that. They would either go do something else, they would play with something else, someone would stare at it. The more people stared at it, the less likely they would be able to deny eating it. And it was actually, this concept is what made this guy start to write this book. His name is Roy I think it's Baumeister, Baumeister. You can find it on Amazon. It's pretty easy. But one of the things is that his child was a part of the study, or one of his kids' schools was part of the study, and I actually think he was part of the study. And over the years, when they got to high school, he noticed that the kids who were unable to delay, the ones that ate the marshmallow right away, they could not delay their impulse, were the ones that were more likely to be in trouble. They did less well in school. It was something that kind of changed his life, and where he decided to look at what does willpower mean, and how do we get more of it, and how do we strengthen it, and how can we use it to be more productive in our lives. It was a nice book. I actually got it on my Kindle. It was a pretty quick read, but I enjoyed reading it. I think there are a couple other strategies. A lot of these you'll recognize. Always be prepared to collect. I have 3x5 note cards that I keep with me all the time, so that as I think of things, I can write them down. I think probably choosing to act is really, really important. It's more, it's like also known as just do it. I think sometimes if you sit down and you can't get started, at some point you just say, I don't care what I can't do, I just have to do it, and you just start. I think that makes a big deal, makes a big difference in your productivity. Of course, habits we already talked about. I like this fourth tip I picked up a couple years ago, is if you set aside, let's say 90 minutes to write a blog or write something for your website, you don't have to do anything else. I mean, you don't have to write if you don't want to, but you block it out on your calendar, and you sit there, and the key is, no matter what, you can't do anything else. You can't listen to music, you can't surf. Well, you could listen to music. You can't surf, you can't read your email, you can't call on the phone. You don't have to write if you don't want to, but the key is you can't do anything else. I thought this was a really, really great strategy, and I've used it quite a bit and like it a lot. It keeps you from getting distracted quite a bit. I had another book, and I've loaned it to somebody, so I can't figure out where it is, but it was a group of consultants who worked with athletes that talked about doing rest. And they took all of their research that they did with athletes, and I'm sorry, I can't think of the name of the book or can't find it right now, but they talked about how important it is to break every 90 minutes in a business environment. They took a lot of their research and brought it into the business environment and said, not only for your mental health, but for your physical health, if you are somebody who sits in front of a computer all day, which a lot of us are, you need to get up every 90 minutes and go do something. It's a good physical, it's good for your circulatory system, but it's also a good creative break. It helps you to understand other things that you need. You just kind of get your mind away from it. They originally started with tennis pros, and noticing that when they finished a particular volley, that as they walked back to the line, that they let their mind relax and they let their mind rest. And the more those athletes that let their mind rest for that few seconds while they were kind of getting ready for the next shot, those were the ones that at the end of a very long match or a very long day, it was like they'd had more rest. And that's basically what the research that they took to the business world and saying, your mind will be more alert and be better if you can take just a few minutes. It doesn't even have to be that long, but if you just get up and just get away for just a few minutes every 90 minutes. The self-monitoring is more important than planning. If you're not going to plan, at least monitor what you're doing. Either monitor how many calls you're making, or monitor how much time you're spending, or monitoring is more important to productivity probably than planning. I think planning is really important, but if you're not going to plan, at least monitor what you do. This you know from like diets. The Weight Watchers is all about monitoring and writing down everything that you do. And they know that of all the diet plans, the plans that have the most success, the commonality is people who actually wrote down what they did. But social monitoring is better. We know this from AA, that you have people that you have accountability, that you report to other peer groups to say, I'm doing this, or I'm doing this well, or I'm not doing this well. That if you say out loud what your goal is and you declare to everybody, this is what I'm going to do, because you have said it to the world, you're more likely to be productive because you have your peer group is monitoring you as well. And of course, we all like this one and hanging out with people that you want to be like, and that's why we're here today, is because we're hanging out with other people that are helping us. Oh, I ran across this tip. I thought it was great. The question is, are you a thinker or are you a doer? Or, if you will, are you a Jobs or a Wozniak? And if you are a thinker, and I know that there are lots of people, Jobs was the thinker of the group, and Wozniak was primarily the doer. He implemented a lot of ideas. But if you are a thinker, I think it's important that you build in rituals to let your brain know that it's time to stop thinking and be productive. I think it's really hard if you're a thinker to realize that you have to stop thinking sometimes, because if all you ever do is think, you never get around to actually implementing something. Either that or find your own Wozniak. I think the last person I want to really kind of talk about is Tony Robbins. I don't know what you think of Tony Robbins. I'm actually a big fan of him. A lot of people think of him as a motivator, and that's all they see him as. But he really, if you haven't done a lot of work with him, or you haven't listened to him a lot, what you realize is that he's all about causing change, and causing change in people's lives. And this is one of his little four-square analysis of what causes change to happen within a person, because change is generally what has to happen in order for us to be more productive usually. He started with the idea of potential. We all have the same amount of potential in our lives. Generally, some of us has more than others, but he gave the example of Roger Bannister, who in 1954 was the first person to run the 4-minute mile, or what it was to run a mile in less than 4 minutes. It was interesting to note that, and I kind of did some research ahead of time as well, that Roger Bannister actually had an exercise schedule, or he actually worked out less than most of his peers at the time. He really didn't spend as much time in practice as others, but a lot of it was his idea that he could actually run a mile in less than 4 minutes. It was his idea. The interesting thing is that while he did break the record, he probably has one of his world record or goals is that he has the shortest world record there is, because within 2 years, another 37 people had also run the mile in less than 4 minutes. The potential was always there. People just had to realize that it was possible. So the idea is that if you have potential, you take an action, and then that action produces a particular kind of result, and that result gives you an attitude about it, which feeds more potential, and so that it's a cycle that you go through. So here's the problem. If, in fact, the results don't reflect your potential, then you kind of stop taking action. In other words, if things don't work out like you thought, um, you basically say, see, I told you so, this wouldn't work. And so the potential you feel like is less, and then you take less action, which gets less results, which makes a worse attitude, and it becomes a terrible cycle. You've got this other way where you say, well, I have a crappy attitude, so your action is, if you think about the salesperson, you don't want to buy this, do you? That kind of thing. It's because you have a bad attitude, the action is really poor, which produces poor results, which gives you a bad attitude, which is that terrible cycle. So basically, you put yourself in a really horrible downward spiral, which is kind of poisonous, and it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy. So what do? I think you say, what if I get my hopes up and it doesn't work? What if I try and do something that doesn't work? Well, you just say, I'm going to find a way, and if this doesn't work, I'll make a way, because that's what allows you to take more potential and to take more action. So if you look at this grid that he has, the idea is that you only have as much potential as you have, and you can only take so much action. There's only so much time in a day. There's only so much you can actually do. And results are what comes about as action. The only thing that you can really change in this cycle, and the way to break out, is to change your attitude. The attitude is what changes everything. If you have a good attitude, it gives you more potential, it gives you a better action, it gives you more results, which then starts that cycle in a more positive way. Probably more than any of us, you guys know that we're facing lots of problems and issues. The idea is, could you turn around and think about how you would focus on things, and could you focus on the positive aspects of things? You've often heard, I know, that when you focus on something, that you see lots of it. You focus on red cars, or you focus on when you're pregnant, you see other pregnant people, and your focus makes you see lots of other things. If you could change your focus on the positive aspects, I'm very much kind of an upbeat person. I know that in this year, and I recommended a book it's called What If Everything Goes Right? I love that book, because the idea is that you can take anything and find the positive aspects. You can also take anything and find the negative aspects. But if all you look at is the negative, you're killing yourself on a daily basis. So you ask yourself, what would happen if I focused on the good stuff? What would happen if I focused on the positive things? And ultimately, that attitude is what's going to change your productivity, which will reinforce the strategy, which will make your system work very well. I started out with this picture. I love this picture. It's a picture by Ansel Adams of the Grand Tetons. The only constant in our life is change, of how to get from A to B. It's always going to change. Even now, this has changed. Over time, this picture has changed. But I'd like to encourage you to, I like to think of it as be the river. I have a replica of this graphic on my desk. I like the concept of being the river, because the river to me means that if you stop, you stagnate. You can't ever stop. You just have to keep moving forward. And rivers kind of find the easiest path and move around obstacles, and over time it erodes away things in its path, and more importantly, as we in the Gulf Coast know, it deposits things along the way. It gets rid of silt and gets rid of bad things, and it keeps going, and it provides water, and it carries people along, and you can kind of go on, and it leaves a path for others to follow. I want to always be moving toward a destination. I don't feel like that we have to be in a hurry. I did when I was younger, but I realize now that task will always be there tomorrow, and that the concept is just to keep going, that even if I'm frozen, and having lived on the Ohio River, I know that there are times when the river is frozen. There's always still movement underneath, and it's the movement is what breaks up the ice and helps you to be more productive. I hope that you'll take allow things to feed you, just like tributaries kind of feed the river. That the most important thing is that you enjoy the path in front of you, because as you enjoy it and as you raise your attitude is what's going to control how much you like your life and how productive you are.